Hello, hello, hello. We are live on YouTube, I think on Facebook too. And in the UK here, my sky looks like Timo's behind him. It's one of those days, so I'm hoping the internet holds up. I'm really delighted, long overdue. The Fab threesome are back. We have got Lance Schuttler from Ascent Nutrition and Dr. Timo from who's done all the animal videos with us and also a lot of the podcasts with Lance and I. And us three haven't been together for quite some while. So we're really looking forward to this interactive chat with everyone today. So before we get stuck in, let's see how everyone's doing. How are you doing, Lance?
I'm doing well, Catherine. Thank you. And how about you?
Oh, I'm doing really well, but I've been literally just before we started filming, but before we went live, one of the doors blew off one of the guinea pig runs. So I've been running around picking up the winds are ridiculous. But apart from that, I'm fine. But poor old Timo, you're not fine, are you?
No, I had a weird type of flu type of thing 2 days ago. Still having the needles all over my body. It's like a type of Chinese torture device.
Oh,
yeah, it feels.
We're going to make you feel better.
I'm excited. I'm excited about today, so I had to join.
Yeah, everyone's going to make Timo feel better. So for those of us that are joining us live, thank you and welcome. And do not be shy about asking your questions, because we're going to have a really good discussion today all about mushrooms. And can we trust them? Why do we need them? What are they good for, particularly with everything that's been thrown about us now? So I'll be keeping an eye on the questions, so don't be shy asking. So let's jump in. Let's start with you, Lance. You are Mr. Mushroom Man, is what I'm going to call you now. Why are mushrooms so important to humans and animals now?
So many reasons, but I like to share this very interesting fact that I've learned about mushrooms as a way to kind of start a conversation off when I am talking about mushrooms, because I think it piques people's interest and it shows how important it really is. So on a genetic level, we humans, we share about 50% of our DNA in common with mushrooms and only about 10% in common with plants. And so we have a more recent ancestry with mushrooms. And so they have evolved in ways where we humans, when we ingest them, the certain species and if it's prepared the right way, we can actually benefit from these immensely. And same with our pets too. They can benefit. But just the fact that we share so much of our DNA in common with mushrooms shows us that these are things and compounds and foods that we can really benefit from and help us on really deep levels.
I love it. I so agree with that. Lance, why do you think mushrooms are so important, particularly for our animals at this time?
You are talking to me. You want to say?
I am talking to you. Yes, right. Timo. Sorry, did I say Lance? I was looking.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, it is important because it's a part of their evolutionary journey. So it's just part of everyday food chain. And they are getting it all the time. They are chewing on it, and they are inhaling it. And fungi are part of the microbiome, an important part of it. And they are an important modulator for the immune system. And they have a direct impact on daily life, although we don't know it as deep as we should right now. But we know the effects. We just don't know the perfect mechanisms, how it is happening. But fungus or fungi are constantly exchanging information with the bacterial or microbiome and animals' intestinal tract. So this is more of real ecosystem. It's not just I take something and it benefits us. It's just a whole ecosystem built on it, on this relationship.
I love that. And for me, a lot of people ask us, there's so much controversy over supplements because a lot of people think that we shouldn't need supplements. But the way I look at it, and you touched on that as well, Timo, is that if we were living a more connected with nature life, more that we're designed to do and more that our animals were designed to do, we would be foraging on these all the time. This would be part and parcel of a natural forage diet, both for animals and for humans. But because so many of us are removed from nature, and when we look at how narrow the food, the varieties of food that most humans and most animals that live with humans have access to, it's no wonder it's causing us issues, because we're just eating so much less variety than before. How do you think that plays into why we need this so much, Lance?
Well, really just what you said at the end specifically, because we as a human race and, you know, in the Western world, typically our food choices, we're not given access first and foremost to often the clean foods that we really want. Of course, there's organic out there, but you know, there's price point concerns for people, and also just access to it. It's not readily available for everyone. But because we can benefit from these mushrooms, and because they are foods, and because they interact with our gut, our brain, our immune system, respiratory, cardiovascular, in many different ways, you know, it's something that it's such a great food to actually get in the diet. And so, you know, as it relates to supplements, yes, technically you could call mushroom powders or mushroom supplements, but it's also really just a food. And some of these are not, again, readily accessible to your average everyday person. And so if you can get them made the right way, grown the right way in the optimal environment, then you can have a clean product and a clean food that you and your pets can take and benefit from.
Love it. Anything to add to that, Timo?
Yeah, so in Baltic cultures, especially like Poland and Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, don't forget them too. So they gather a lot of mushrooms. Every time there is some rain, you see a lot of people just hurrying to the closest forest and just gather as many mushrooms as possible, and they enjoy it a lot. And I think it's very positive for them too. But I had a question for Lance. Lance, how important it is to know what, in this case, call it produce to use. So which it's strains, different subcultures. How do you find the right ones? Because if I would listen to this for the first time in my life, I have no idea about mushrooms. So how do I go with it? So where do I look at?
Great question, Timo. So, okay, first, when it comes to the species, and I'll answer your question on the strains as well, but the species, so as an example, one could be lion's mane or agaricon or reishi or chaga. You know, a lot of these mushrooms benefit different systems in the body. And so you'd really want to identify first, what's the species of the mushroom that you are most interested in? And you know, what are the things that it may help with that you're trying to target? But in terms of the actual strain of those species, that's where a lot of differentiation also occurs. So not every lion's mane species is the same as another lion's mane species. So what you can do, and you know, this is something that we do, and we can talk about this a little bit more later, but we will genetically test the strain of each species. And basically we're looking at the genetics, and we're seeing how strong is this strain of the species, and is it going to give us the best chance to have the most optimal, strongest, healthy producing finished mushroom product. So it's sort of like, you know, racehorses or, you know, any sort of breeds with animals. You're looking for the best genetics of it, so you have so the animal has the best chance of performing well or doing whatever they're wanting to do. Same with the mushrooms. We're trying to identify the most optimal strain based on its genetics, and then we grow it in the most optimal environment to create this product, where then we test at the end and show that our products are testing at higher levels of the important constituents in there, like the beta glucans, which are the polysaccharides. And you know, we're doing that and showing that and creating this finished product that is very strong, because that's what we want to put out, is something that's unique and different, but also very strong and effective.
I love that. And we've got a good question here from Marius about, do mushrooms have to be processed somehow to have some of their benefits?
Yes. So as an example, I was talking about the polysaccharides in that, the beta glucans. These are part of like what we call it, the cell walls of the mushrooms. And sometimes they need to be heated or steam heated to basically become more bioavailable. And this is why a lot of mushrooms need to be cooked. Not only for that reason, some compounds need to be, destroyed off. It depends on the species. But that's one of the main reasons, is so that these compounds, and in particular the polysaccharides, the beneficial sugars, actually benefit us. And these polysaccharides actually are the prebiotics that our good gut bacteria, our microbiome, can feed off of, and then help to induce these immunomodulating effects or cardiovascular protective effects, neurocognitive effects, things like that.
I love it. Anything to add to that, Timo?
Yes, I know it because we are talking now about 2013-ish. We used to use an American brand of mushrooms on the horses. And I would see that when we had another mushroom product from Central Europe, it was the same strain, but it didn't have the same effect at all, like zero. And maybe the processing was different, I guess, but it was not potent at all. So I think how it's processed plays a big role.
Yes, absolutely. And something else too, like on that note, is where it's grown and how it's grown. Mushrooms, there's this concept and thought about mushrooms that all mushrooms are toxic and poisonous and you don't want to consume them. That's an erroneous thought. For different reasons, but the main reason is that it depends where it's grown. So yes, if you're around a nuclear, waste site, or, some sort of toxic landfill site, or, anything like that, where a lot of chemicals are being used, pesticides, the mushrooms are like sponges. And so they'll absorb the nutrients around them. And so if then we consume it, yes, we're going to get some of those toxins, because mushrooms also are bioremediators for the whole environment in different ways. But the place where these things are grown is of utmost importance, along with, like we talk about the strain of the species. But if you're growing it in the right environment and giving it what it needs to grow properly and right, then you can actually produce a mushroom that's very clean and pure and very nutritious, very healthy, and something that can really benefit.
Yeah, I love it. And last, I will put, when this is finished, I'll put the live that Lance and I did a month or so ago, which was absolutely fantastic, going into a lot more detail about a couple of strands of the mushrooms. But we talked then about the doctrine of signatures, didn't we, Lance? And I like this comment or this question from Marius again. Is mycelium like the Earth's nervous system and bioavailability? I really think it is, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And like Timo was saying earlier, there's this interplay and this intermix of nutrients that's going on in the soil because of the mycelium and the mycorrhizal network there. So the trees will benefit the mushrooms. The mushrooms will benefit the trees because they're exchanging nutrients and giving each other nutrients. And it really is sort of like this internet of the earth. I mean, Paul Stamets, arguably the most well-known mycologist, he talks about that often, how mycelium and that mycelial network is like a second internet, and that a lot of information is being communicated and transmitted across far distances. There's one mushroom that it's not a fruiting body, it's the mycelium of the mushroom underground in Oregon here in the US, and it's several miles, square miles wide. It's known as the biggest known living organism, and it's underground, and it's a mycelial mass of mushrooms. So very interesting stuff. But Timo, maybe you've got something to add on to that.
Yeah, it says 2.384 acres big. Its name is Armillaria ostoye. and I'm blown away by it. It's just huge. The second thing I'm very interested in is how we don't actually, when you say fungi, mushrooms, how we don't actually know what we're talking about, so that they are the third sub tree or sub leg of animals, plants, and mushroom. They are somewhere in the middle. They are neither that nor that, because most of the people I know think that mushrooms are plants. And because we are thinking like that, I would like to also ask you, in that sense, what do you think about champignons and other type of culinary mushrooms? What do you think about them? Do you think they're just good food stuff, or are they actually also having some extra benefits for people who are eating them regularly?
What was the first mushroom you said, Timo?
Yeah, it is champignons, the French mushrooms. It's
Oh,
called.
yeah.
Yeah.
That one specifically, I don't know what nutrients or benefits off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
again, if they're edible mushrooms and you're not going to get sick from them, I think they've studied and identified as many as they can. There's certainly more out there in the wild, many more, but what they have identified and studied, they've found compounds in there for pretty much any culinary mushroom. It's also going to be a medicinal mushroom in some sense. It'll, of course,
Like
depend
sheep pepper,
on,
right?
yes. It'll depend on the species, of course, but really any that we're eating and that are safe to eat, there are going to be, residual effects that can be beneficial for humans and possibly for pets too, depending on the species.
I'd like to add, sorry, I was just going to say, I'd like to add to that, because when you look at all plants, but also all the different types of mushrooms, the number of active constituents within just one type is absolutely huge. And you really see this in nature in terms of, obviously there's going to be different levels of the active constituents relative to each other, depending again on the soil, the area, the substrate they're grown on. And this is where animals can teach us so much in terms of really being able to pick out the right ones for the right purpose. So adding, everyone knows how much I love Zach Bush's work, and I think you both do as well. And I think one of the things that's so obvious at the moment is coming back again to how limited our diet is and what the crossover between a food and a herb or a medicine is. And it's not sort of a clearly defined line often, because a lot of these things, if we were eating how we're designed to eat, we'd be having a huge amount more variety and keeping ourselves in better balance by our daily eating or foraging habits. And the same goes with any animals that are in our care, because even if you take our horses now, and Timo and I have been doing a lot of work on this, they're just not getting access to the range of nutrients that they need to keep themselves healthy.
That is totally correct.
Yeah, this is quite an interesting one. Again, you're asking some great questions in the chat, and there's quite a few people saying about how they and their wildlife, like Goretti saying the bears love the mushrooms as well in northern Canada. But who can answer this one about, mold and mushrooms, their differences, but also some of the properties that they've got in common about cleaning up the environment? And bear in mind, when we're cleaning up the environment, we might be talking about the external environment, but very much our internal environment as well. Who wants to go first on that one?
I think this expert should go.
Okay, with mold, the mold and the fungus, again, the mold, it will depend on the species, because there are different species of strains of mold and species, but mold and fungus, they are along the same lines in different ways, but obviously, again, like mold is not something you want to eat. But with, these mushrooms, as they're grown and cultivated and they start growing and actually, producing these fruiting bodies, they are things that we can eat. The question's a little difficult, Catherine, so I'm not for sure how to keep going too much into this, but specifically, the mold and the fungus, they are related in different ways, but again, it's something that they are also very different.
I want to add that you ask people not to eat mold, but the French would say, "I put it on my cheese." So they eat moldy cheese and they like it. And I think in some cases mold might be something beneficial. I have no idea. But I wanted to answer this question. Are any mushrooms safe and beneficial for cats and dogs? And I would say yes, more for dogs than for cats, let's say. But most of the fungi that are very beneficial for humans are also good for dogs and cats, except maybe shaga, which might be over, how do you say it, exciting some dogs and cats. I would say mostly as an individual. So it's individually different.
Yeah.
Some react to it, some not. But shaga, I know that some dogs and cats totally thrive on it mentally in high energy levels that might be detrimental for the household.
I do, as people have heard me talk about before, sort of animals self-selecting, and I would say yes, absolutely. My dogs and actually sometimes the cats self-select different ones. I've been recently trying them out with your lion's mane and Agaricon mushrooms, and they all love those, Lance. So let's go into a bit more detail about those. So let's start off with the lion's mane. Because we've got some comments on that. Some activated pineals have got some good comments on how mushrooms have really helped. Talk us a bit through about the lion's mane and why it's very relevant for some of the challenges that we're facing now, Lance.
Definitely. And Catherine, I think now is a good time. I'm going to present a few slides on this so people can see some photos.
Wonderful.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
Okay, so this is the lion's mane mushroom. And what you had said earlier, Catherine, about the law of signatures or the doctrine of signatures, often what is found in nature looks like what can be benefited in the human body. And so this, in some ways, looks like a brain, or it looks like the neurons that are connected to other neurons with, these shaggy spines. But it's something that's been used for a long time, and it was reserved only for royalty throughout Asia for quite some time. And it was also commonly known that monks would use it as a tea to help aid their meditation and their just overall practice. But it's shown, or it's said, that it's going to give a person memory of a lion and nerves of steel. So this is like some of the lore behind it. But why is that said? So again, it sort of looks like a brain. It kind of looks like it has these neuronal connections, and the myelin sheath is connected there too. And it's helping the movement of electricity across the whole brain and nervous system. And it's doing this a couple different ways, but one way is that it's stimulating a process called nerve growth factor, or a compound called nerve growth factor. And this then stimulates something called neurogenesis, the creation or repairing of damaged neurons. There's other compounds that lion's mane is known to produce, but these neuropeptides are shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and then stimulate the production of these, and then really help the neurons and the cells, the gut-brain axis as well, because we know that the gut and brain are so connected. Lion's mane is something that also has been studied to support a healthy inflammatory response and help the gut, because it's modulating the immune system, the microbiome with the different compounds in there, and helping the nervous system in different ways. But one specific study a couple months ago that came out was that it showed that neuronal growth was doubled with one compound in lion's mane, and this is heracerin A. There's many other compounds like this, these hericenones and erinacines, that stimulate this process. And, this is one of the main things that lion's mane is used for, is the brain, gut, and nervous system. Of course, the immune system too, but the brain is the big one. And so again, what we're doing is growing them longer, so we get higher levels of these active constituents, grow them here in the USA organically, and then we're testing them all throughout the whole process, not only to make sure it's, stays clean and pure, but also then that the finished product is strong and something that we want to put out.
I love it. And We've got quite a few questions in here, which is really, really good. You know, where do we buy them? I've put the link below for where we buy them, and there's a 10% off code there. But the finding reputable suppliers is absolutely key, because being able to trust the quality of the product that you're buying, whether you're actually buying, you know, even culinary mushrooms or ones that you're using to sort of supplement with, is absolutely key. What are some of the key things that people should look for that?
So, okay, you want to first see where is it being grown. Like, there's a lot of companies that will grow in China, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself. Like, you know, it's a blanket statement, but there's a lot of truth to it, because we know that just in general, China, there's a lot of environmental pollution going on there. And so again, the mushrooms absorb its environment. And if it's grown somewhere near where there's pollution, those mushrooms will absorb that. And there's been a lot of tests done on mushroom products showing that exactly. You want to also see what's the substrate that it's being grown on. Okay, some companies will use oats, some will use brown rice. We use organic brown rice. This gives the best conversion for these two mushrooms, specifically the Agaricon mushroom. And then, of course, like, just whatever details can be shared. How is this company doing it? How are they growing it? Where? How are they testing? What are the active constituent levels in a finished product? A lot of companies will not show that or talk about it, you know, because a lot of these things, when they're grown in certain ways and not grown long enough, you're getting very little of the actual mushroom, and you're just getting a lot of starch or polysaccharides. The beta glucans, they can be good, or they are good, but a lot of products, finished mushroom products, are just beta glucans from oats, and they're not actually beta glucans derived from the mushrooms or the mycelium, and they're not going to be as strong, and you're not going to have as high of levels in there either.
And you've got quite a lot of experience using the mushrooms with various species of animals, haven't you, Timo?
Yes, I have it, and I have to say that the type of mushroom plays a big role, but what also plays a big role is that how fresh the product is. So I see that a lot of times the production date of the can and the freshness of the product is not always on the same page. And I think if you buy things that are grown in China, you might come up with this, because they have to run a much bigger spectrum of production, and who knows when it's packed, and who knows how long it waited where. Another thing is China is producing more than 11 times of the organic. China is selling 11 times more organic certified things than they produce. So it's hard to trust them on this one. But yeah, I would go with the reputable source. But
Yeah.
I wanted to add one thing there when you said beta glucans. So there are different types. There are yeast beta glucans, and so mushrooms, yeast, they all and algae, they all have their own type of beta glucans, and they all do different things. So to claim that it has a lot of beta glucans, it just makes no sense, because it's not, how do you say it, identified.
Yeah.
So that's why if you want to do immune modulation, you can use all three in different ways. If you know what you're doing, is far bigger chance of success than using just one. But you have to know that just because it says beta glucan doesn't mean that it comes from mushroom.
That's a great point, Timo. And there's a lot of misrepresentation within the mushroom space on that specifically. You know, some products will say 60% standardized beta glucans. And there's a lot of different ways that they can manipulate that language, because just like you said, well, is it coming from the mushroom, or is it also from the oats or something else?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's alpha glucans. There's lots of different polysaccharides that can be present and that we can benefit from. And it just sort of depends what the species is.
Yeah. So, in terms of the microbiome, most people have heard of how vital the microbiome is, and also how deficient most humans and domesticated animals' microbiomes are now, and how that makes us susceptible to everything that's being thrown at us. So, how do some of these more beneficial types of mushrooms really help? We've touched on this a bit, but Timo, let's start with you. Why should people be looking to incorporate mushrooms into their diets, into their animals' diets, to help sustain a healthy microbiome with all the benefits that that brings?
Well, we have to look at the microbiome with two basic points. One is what comes in involuntarily. That means through the air, and it comes through the air, through inhalation, through drinking water without knowing it's inside, right? And these are important part. And the second thing is, it is part of the diet, right?
Mm.
And our animals cannot choose their diets, so we choose it for them. And when they are outside in the wild, they could choose, but now they can't. And because they can't, we have to make sure that they can get their mushrooms, different type of immune regulators, especially immune regulators. And of course, we have all the important minerals and vitamins that we get through the mushrooms. So we have to incorporate them somehow to help them out. And I can tell you, if you incorporate them pretty well with the horses, especially if they have digestive problems, the speed you see recovery is immense. It's like very potent. But of course, with big power or big strength comes also big responsibility. So you really have to know what you're doing, or you might overdo things too, because they are very potent.
Yeah. Lance, what have you got to add to that?
So I'm going to share a little study on lion's mane specifically for the gut. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something talking about the mushrooms and beta glucans from mushrooms on the microbiome and human health. That's actually not the one I wanted to show. This one specifically is the lion's mane, and it talks about how it supports the gut health, immunity, and the gut microbiome. There's a couple different mechanisms of how it's supporting the gut. I'm going to actually show this too. So this is the fruiting body of a mushroom of the lion's mane. All right. So this is not our product, but this is, just what you can get in a store from the farmer's market and consume it. But that lion's mane, what it's doing is it's known to support a healthy inflammatory response. And so we know that a lot of inflammatory things going on in the gut leads to, dysbiosis and a lot of dysregulation within the gut. And so if we can calm down inflammation in the gut, and obviously throughout the whole body, but specifically the gut, the microbiome is going to just naturally benefit because there's going to be less inflammation, and they will have the ability to do what they need to do, the microorganisms in there. Secondly, the intestinal lining has been shown to be supported in being repaired by lion's mane, by some of the compounds in there and the nerve regenerating aspects of what we talked about. So if the nerves and the nervous system is being repaired, then in some ways, some of the cells and the tissues can also be repaired in either direct or roundabout ways. But again, if you're just lowering inflammation and you're supporting the gut by giving it good compounds that the good bacteria can feed off of, you are going to support the gut and the whole digestive process and system in different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that leads really nicely into Gina's question. So opening this up to either of you. If someone's got allergies to mold, can they still take mushrooms? I know what my answer is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. There shouldn't be any reason why you would be allergic to them.
Yeah. And I would start and introduce them. I know Gina's saying that she was going to try it anyway, but from that, when you look into all the beneficial properties that Timo and Lance have been covering, and the fact that it's modulating the immune system, then they should be very, very beneficial to you. I do want to, apparently wild lion's mane is protected species here in the UK as well. So before we get on to one more question from Colette, then I do really want you, if you're okay, Lance, just to tell people again a few of the properties of the lovely Agaricon mushroom, because we are really, really taken with this, both the animals and the humans in our families. But Colette's asking here, I know we can't make any medical claims at all, but in general talk, lion's mane, would it be an appropriate addition for someone with MS symptoms?
Yeah, like you said, all right, talk to your doctor. Now, if I was in this situation, I would absolutely be using lion's mane. I would also be using algae oil, DHA, humic and fulvic acid, a lot of other brain compounds for sure. I don't want to, list them all off, but those ones absolutely. And in fact, the lion's mane and, the algae oil is something that I've recommended even before I had this company, is something that I was suggesting to people, regardless of, specifically what it was, but anything brain or nervous system related, if they wanted to support that, lion's mane and the omegas were something I was always suggesting.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the properties of the Agaricon? Because we did cover that last time, but a lot of people haven't seen this. And this has got some very special properties that I think are very relevant to everyone at the moment.
Yes, definitely. So I'll pull that little presentation back up. Okay, so the Agaricon, this was just a little background information for people. Is this mushroom was studied by the U.S. Department of Defense BioShield Biodefense Program and the NIH and NIAID. They were looking at different biological compounds, let's say, in nature and how these might interact with them, okay? And there was 200,000 different samples submitted, and this was after 9/11. Remember, there was biological compounds being delivered in the mail and things like that. And so there was a lot of interest of finding, let's say, possible antidotes or compounds that could counteract some of these, dangerous toxins. So 200,000 samples were submitted to this study. Some were synthetic pharmaceuticals, some were natural compounds, and many of them were natural mushrooms. There were a couple strains of the Agaricon as this study took place. There's more to it, but when the information came out, they found that Agaricon was literally off the charts in terms of some of its biological activity. Some of the stuff, again, I can't really name specifically, but it's very, very strong stuff, as we know. And the scientist who is, partaking in the study, or one of them, he submitted these mushrooms, and his compound actually got swarmed by Black Hawk helicopters because he had the Agaricon, and it was very, very potent. And the government, didn't know if he was making antidotes or, exactly what he was doing, but nothing bad ended up happening. It was all fine. The results ended up being published in some different journals. Some patents were filed for some of the compounds within the Agaricon and other mushrooms. But they found that it was very active against things relating to cows, birds, and pigs. They found it was also effective against a toxin called neurotoxin VX, and that's an illegal chemical weapon. It just shows you how powerful that is. But more on like the spiritual side of this, or like the mythology of it, is that they called this mushroom the elixir of long life, Elixirium ad longum vitam. And these mushrooms can grow out in the wild to be 70 years plus old, these fruiting bodies. And they grow specifically just in a few different places throughout Greece and the Pacific Northwest. But it's commonly been used throughout this whole time for respiratory health, immune, lung, and neurological health too. Also helping support a healthy inflammatory response. But this is something where the Haida people, the Pacific Northwest, the indigenous there, they believe that this mushroom would help protect them against what they called, conditions caused by the spirits. They believe that it was very anti-archonic or anti-demonic, whatever you want to call it. And they actually believe that if they would consume it, but also take little parts of this mushroom and place it in their home, it would protect them. Shamans would even go as far as carving faces in the mushrooms, like you can see here on the right, and placing them over their graves because they believe it would help protect them in the afterlife. So there's a lot of lore to it. The like spiritual side of it is very fascinating, but clearly the scientific, physical aspects of this is very potent and incredible. It's not really known that much. It's certainly growing in awareness, but given the whole global situation and lung health and respiratory health that people are concerned about, Agaricon is definitely one that people want to look into because of how strong it is. But again, same thing, grown organically here in the US, grown them longer than other Agaricon mushroom products out there. And so we get a very strong finished product.
I love it. And it tastes delicious. I've just been sitting here eating it as we go along, and it really, really tastes delicious. And all I'm going to add to that in my YouTube friendly language is bearing in mind a lot of the possibilities about what might be coming next. This is definitely one that everyone needs for themselves and their animals. One of the key things is that being prepared, knowing what some of the challenges that we're being faced with just allows you to make really good decisions for yourself and anyone in your care to make sure that you've got the right things in your cupboard should the need arise. So
I agree, Catherine. And Agaricon is a mushroom, and they've published this in different books and different research papers saying that it's hypothesized that Agaricon played an instrumental role in literally the survival of the human species in different areas, not the whole species as a whole, but in different areas throughout the world. As there are different I'm just going to say things that go around in the air, and different times of the year, and people get sick, things like that. This is a mushroom that they believe that it actually helped to prolong the living of the species in these different areas, specifically the Pacific Northwest and throughout parts of Asia and Europe. And this is a mushroom that can also actually carry fire. And so it's something that it's, again, not just like evolutionary wise beneficial for us on a genetic level, but it's sort of played a role in other ways too, like literally being able to carry and transport fire. So it's fascinating, and just something that definitely, with what all the talk is and rumors going on around there, what's next, this is 100% a mushroom that people should be interested in. And like, we're not even saying this from a marketing perspective, but truly like helping people, because we know how strong this stuff really is.
Yeah. And there's a reason why lots of people don't want us to know about these natural solutions that, I was speaking to someone today, actually, that I was meeting when I was out foraging for my animals. I go out foraging, picking all the herbs. And I was speaking to this lovely old lady, and, this is the information that was passed down from generation to generation. And over the last couple of generations, it's been deliberately taken away, this knowledge, and hidden from us all. And there's a reason why they don't want these natural remedies to be used to maintain health, protect us, and rebalance ourselves when things go wrong. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. So any final comments from you, Timo?
No, I'm surprised. I learned a lot. And although I use mushrooms for a very long time, I always use them in a pinpoint way. I didn't know that some of the mushrooms have far bigger lore and used behind them. I'm happy to be here, although I'm ill. You can hear it. But yeah, it was great. Thanks.
I love it. I always learn so much from you two. It's really brilliant. And I think sharing this information far and wide for people that need it, because these sort of that something like mushrooms is less controversial to a lot of people than some of the other remedies. It's something that we are designed to eat, that our animals are designed to eat and live in harmony with. So that, remember to incorporate them. Final question here from Marius. Can any mushroom come to fruition from mycelium in the perfect environment?
I'm not quite understanding the question. I mean, possibly. I mean, in any environment, possibly. I guess it depends what it is.
I think if you were looking to grow it yourself, Marius, yeah, I think, you know, understanding what the different conditions, the different species need and different substrates and stuff, I'm sure, test it out and let us know what you managed to grow. So I was just thinking, when you were talking about the Agaricon, I was thinking someone should go and put some on the remnants of where the Georgia Guidestones were.
Great idea. Great idea.
Sense of humor there. So Lance, I mean, we are really, really grateful. So for you providing, Lance and Timo providing their expertise and their information. Really, really happy for everyone that's joined us in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. If you do like this information, please do consider hitting the like and sharing it with someone, because that helps get rid of the algorithms, because the health related videos are not well spread on certain platforms. So we must talk about where we can get them from before we go. So obviously we can get them from the Ascent Nutrition. The link I have put in the chat. It's really, really important that you get good quality products. And Lance, luckily, has given 10% off all his products in the shop with code CE10. Anything to add to that? Because you've been working very hard, haven't you, Lance, to get these distributed in as many countries as possible?
Yes, yes. We ship to almost every country in Europe for the mushrooms. Canada, the UK, Australia, we actually can't ship the mushrooms to. Their government will destroy them at customs. We attempted to, and they just didn't let it happen for the customers. It's actually illegal by them to do that, technically. They have their views of what laws are, but, you know, it's a side point. They need to get with the times. When they are, we will absolutely turn back on shipping for Australians for the mushrooms and the humic and fulvic.
Absolutely love it. Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Thank you, Lance and Timo.
Thanks a lot.
We know you've been feeding your brains with this. That's why they're both so big and so active. So thank you so much for joining us. I have to finish with the joke. They're both fun guys.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.